In the previous session, we talked about Java components and Java statements. We also mentioned the variable definition, and we talked about Java virtual machine, which is the major component that runs the Java program. A programmer writes Java programming statements for a program. These statements are known as source code. We generally use a text editor to edit and save a Java source code file. These Java source code files have a .java file extension. A compiler is a program that translates this source code into an executable form. So we have a text editor which edits and saves the Java source code file, which ends with .java extension. And we use a compiler to translate the source code into an executable form. A compiler is run using the source code file as an input. Syntax errors that may be in the program will be discovered during this compilation process. Syntax errors are mistakes that the programmer have made that violate the rules of the programming language. The compiler creates another file that holds the translated instruction. Most compilers translate source code into an executable file containing machine code, which can be directly run on a certain CPU. But of course, because this is machine code, it's limited to the CPU that it was compiled against. The Java compiler, however, translates a Java source file into a file that contains bytecode instructions. Bytecode instructions are the machine language of the Java virtual machine and cannot be directly executed by the CPU. Instead, bytecode files, which ends with a .class file extension, is recognizable by Java virtual machine, or also called JVM. JVM is a program that emulates a microprocessor or CPU. It executes the bytecode instructions as they are read. For this reason, it's often called an interpreter. Java is often referred to as an interpreted language because it's not compiled at once. Instead, it's read and executed as it goes. So here is the flow. A programmer will use a text editor to type in, to edit, and save Java statement into a source code file, which ends with a .java extension. Then the programmer will use a Java compiler to read the source code .java file and produce a bytecode.class file. This class file is not executable by the CPU, but is executable by Java virtual machine. JVM will read and interpret this .class file and generate whatever result is yielded from this bytecode, which is the program execution. And because Java virtual machine runs bytecode and is not machine dependent, we call it portable. Portable means that a program may be written in one type of computer and then run on a wide variety of computers with little or no modification. Java bytecode runs on the JVM. It's not on any particular CPU. But JVM itself is written in machine code. That's how it can interpret this bytecode into the CPU code. By creating a Java code and run this against the JVM, we are separating the machine details from the programming language. That's why we say Java is portable. And as we mentioned in the very beginning of this class, that's exactly why Java picks up momentum, because you never know on internet age where your code will be executed. As long as the other side has the JVM working, your Java code can be run there on their machine. And it's much easier to distribute JVM than to distribute your Java bytecode, right? So in fact, most of the operating system have JVM as a part of it. It's like Windows, Mac, Linux, Unix, they all have JVM, which means as soon as you write a Java code, source code, and translate that, compile it into bytecode, your code will be executable on these machines with the help of JVM. With most programming languages, portability is achieved by compiling a program for each CPU it will run on. Java takes a different approach, which is they distribute JVM instead of distribute executables. Each platform has a JVM, so programmers do not have to recompile for different platforms. Such as the dot class can be distributed to JVM for Windows, JVM for Linux, JVM for Mac, JVM for Unix. Right. The software you use to write Java program is called the Java Development Kit, or JDK. There are different versions of JDK, different editions of JDK. There's a standard edition, which you can download for free. There's the enterprise edition, which has more features, but apparently you need to purchase that. Only companies will do that. And there's micro edition. They're all available for download at java.oracle.com. And the Java compiler is a command line utility. The command to compile a program is java filename.java. And javac is the Java compiler. So you will run a javac with a Java file. This Java file will be the input source code. And the result of running this javac will be generating a .class file called payroll.class. But apparently, if you have to go through this yourself, use a text editor, and use a compiler and put this into Java virtual machine, this will be a lot of components. That's why other programmers create an integrated development environment, or also called IDE, that combines text editing, compiling, and the Java virtual machine execution into one place. Thus, it's called integrated. We will introduce an IDE called Eclipse in our next session.